All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone. Welcome to our SIGUCCS webinar, Aligning IT User Services with the Organization's Strategic Plan. Anthony Farber is a Manager of Information Services and Technology Service Desk, and he joined NJIT in 2008. 2010 he became the Helpdesk Supervisor and was recently promoted to Manager of the Information Services and Technology Service Desk. Phil Stickna is the Assistant Director of Technology Support Services. But before we dive into the presentation, I just want you to know that this presentation is being recorded and should be available probably later today or on the weekend on our SIGUCCS website. Also, everyone is muted by default, so if you have a question, please use the chat feature and I'll help facilitate the conversation, let Anthony and Phil know when there's a question. So with that, let me turn it over to Phil and Anthony. There you go, gentlemen.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. As Beth introduced us, I am Phil, and Anthony is with me today. And we're going to go over our slightly updated version of the presentation we gave at last year's SIGUCCS in Tampa, or actually St. Petersburg. So some quick facts about NJIT before we get in. We were founded in 1881. We're in Newark. We're one of three research institutions in New Jersey, and we have some problems that some of you probably are familiar with. Our students continue to increase our enrollments, but our staff lines are not increasing. When we first gave this presentation, the numbers on the right-hand side, the undergraduate and graduates, were a little bit lower. The faculty was only, I think, 2 lower. So in this year, we've only increased by 2 faculty, but we have a few hundred more students here. So it's the same old story. We have to learn how to do more with less. A little background on our IT. We are a centralized IT. The Information Services and Technology Division is run by our CIO, who holds the title of Associate Provost, and he reports up through the Provost. So today's agenda is that we're going to go over how IT business value is oftentimes missing from an organization's strategic plan. And in order for us to demonstrate the value that IT does provide, we had to start changing the conversation. We did that through 3 key ways. By encouraging, empowering, and educating our support staff, by looking at how our support staff was structured and streamlining it, and then by getting a better understanding of what we do. And we were able to demonstrate IT's business value potential based on what the strategic plan had written into it. And then at the end, we'll cover a little bit of how we're continuing, and actually how we've continued over this past year by using continual service improvement.
So I'm sure most of you already know the answer to this question, but does your institution's strategic plan acknowledge the business value of IT? Do we even know what the business value of IT really is? I mean, we know, as working in IT, what we bring to the table, but your provost, your president, so on and so forth, may not understand that because they think more in terms of business. So how is your IT investment? Does your strategic plan directly address IT investment? Is IT investment at your institution where you want it? And does your administration see IT as a budget black hole? I think for the first 2, most of us can probably answer that no, we are not. You know, our strategic plan doesn't directly address IT. Our investment for us isn't where we want it, because I'm sure we would, all like better machines in the labs than what are there, or better machines for us to be able to do our jobs on. But there's just no money because we don't bring money to the institution. We, as the 3rd bullet says, we get money and we spend money, but very rarely, there are some cases where, some institutions do chargebacks. We don't. So we get $100,000 and we use $100,000 but don't bring anything back. So there's no ROI for us. But why don't they include us? Well, because for the most part we have difficulty communicating our potential value to the business in business terms. I'm sure most of you can appreciate the next slide. You know, when everything's working okay, why do we need to give you more money? Everything's fine. But when everything breaks, it's all our fault. And they don't think we do anything.
So a few years ago, our provost put a call out to the university to kind of crowdsource the next strategic plan. The members of IT saw, well, not necessarily members of IT, but a lot of us saw this as an opportunity to get our agenda put forward into the strategic plan. We found out that most of the university had the exact same idea, which meant that, you know, there's a pie and it's a finite pie, and not all of it can go to IT just because we're yelling loudly than we have been in the past. So this plan included getting information from all the staff, the students, and the faculty. People were asked to volunteer. And after about a 6 to 8 month process, 5 key areas were identified. These are listed right here: students, learning, scholarly research, community, and investment. And then teams were determined to review those 5 areas and come up with what we should include specifically on our plan. Our Information Services and Technology Division had about 10 representatives on it that were members of various teams. Some of the KPIs that were identified for each of these priorities are listed here, and as you can see, something I covered earlier is that we were looking to actively increase our student enrollment and our student retention. The point under learning about convergence, that would be, I'm trying to think how I can define that. The idea, it's not a hybrid class in terms of, you know, meets half-time in person and then half-time it'll be online through a Moodle or a Blackboard format. This is where the class is given, and using something like what we're using right now, I think in our case we use WebEx. Students can remotely join the class live and participate. Every single class is also recorded, so students that cannot join at that time can go back and review something later. And the idea is that by 2020, at least 25% of our courses will be offered under that format. We also are looking to increase our funding for our research. So looking at this, the members of IT realized that of those 5 priorities, IT or funding IT or computers or anything directly related to IT, it's not listed there in those 5 items. But we are able to see that there is a clear link between each one of those items and what we can bring to the table. We just had to figure out how we can demonstrate that to the administration. And as I mentioned earlier, to do this, we're changing the conversation. It's no longer about how much we spend. It's about how much value we can bring that can affect those 5 priorities. So what we're going to cover next is how we encouraged, empowered, and educated our IT technical staff. We reorganized our support structure a little bit because we realized we had some redundancies, and better defined what we do so that we could have that conversation with the management or with our users, and both of them can understand the value that we bring to the table. So with the 3 E's, there's no beginning or ending to this cycle. It's just continuously going on. If we had to give more weight to one versus the others, it would probably be encourage. If people are educated, that's great, but if not encouraged to use their knowledge, it doesn't matter. And if they're empowered to do things, again, that's great, but if they're not encouraged to use that, it doesn't matter.
So I always found that Bill Murray's always good for a little encouragement. But when we got a little bit of a change in management, which we'll go into a little bit later when we reorganize. The first thing that our director wanted to do was encourage the management role. He wanted us to identify and highlight strengths of our staff and of ourselves. And, you know, it's hard to look at yourself and say, well, what am I really good at? Because personally, I think I'm good at everything that I do. You know, but what is it that I do? Somebody's going to be better at something. You know, somebody has to be good at one thing and somebody else has to be good at something else so that they can work together, and together they can make things a lot better. But unless you encourage your staff to do that, they're not going to want to. You know, you don't want to focus on weaknesses. You know, somebody's no good at pulling out reports. Sending them and spending thousands of dollars on them to learn how to do reports when it's something they're no good at isn't going to help. When on the other hand you have somebody who's really good at reports, and spending the money on them is going to be a very, very well spent money, because they're going to learn how to do them even better than they already do. So that's the first thing you want to do, is identify and highlight their strengths. Then you want to provide them with positive and constructive feedback. You don't want to just bash them over the head with, oh, you know, you didn't do this, you didn't do this, you didn't do this. You want to say, well, you know, yeah, you may have messed up, but what can we learn from it? What can we get from it? What are we not going to do next time? How can we change it? You also want to, we changed the focus of the annual goals. You know, we made them more realistic, we made them more challenging, we made them achievable, and we made them relevant. You know, you want them to kind of mesh in that little silo, because if they're realistic but challenging, the person or people will be more apt to try and achieve them. But if you give them something that's not realistic or is absolutely boring, they're not going to try.
Yeah, to give you an example there, a couple years ago, one of our reviews had that we had to learn how to be desktop support experts for Linux. Now, we have a separate department on campus that's dedicated to that goal. That's not something that we handle directly in this department. Of course, it's something that's good to know, I suppose, but as far as a goal of, you know, taking a class or becoming certified to become a Linux desktop support specialist, when 98% of our users are Windows users, 2% of them are Mac users, and that less than 1% Linux users go directly to our research and Linux computing department, it wasn't really a relevant goal. When we wrote this presentation back last year, one of the goals on our review that year was to roll out a new IT service management system, which we did, and we'll get into a little bit later in this webinar. And that's something that was much more relevant to what our job was, what our responsibilities were.
Right. So we also encouraged our technologists. We wanted them to take pride in everything they do, including the boring, everyday, mundane IT work. You know, when is a password reset more than a password reset? You know, when your team looks at it as, well, what do you do? Well, I help people reset their passwords. Yes, but what does that password facilitate? Because if there's no password, they can't log in. They can't log into their online learning system. They can't pay their bill if their bill is due. They can't add, drop classes if they have to. They can't do anything. So you're facilitating their learning by helping them reset their password. Or if it's an instructor, you're facilitating their ability to teach their class, to help their student. So it's not just a password reset. It's helping to keep those wheels of education turning for both students and the faculty and the staff members. So is there, that helps build that relationship between the IT work and the instruction. That's kind of like, let's say, the base of it. You know, without a password reset, you have nothing, or without a password, you can't get into anything. So you can make your password and your accounts the base, and we needed to kind of show them that this is more than just that. This also allows students to kind of want to be more engaged, because when a student can't remember their password, if the help desk or service desk, you know, kind of brushes them off and goes, well, I don't know, and it takes them 3-4 days, you know, they've already lost 3-4 days of class time. They're not going to get back. And that could be impactful on the rest of their lives. Because some of them may say, you know what, I missed a week of class, I'm just going to drop the class now. And then at the end of the semester, they may not be apt to come back. So we don't want that. We want to say, we care, yes, your password doesn't work, let's fix it now, let's get you back into class so that you can continue on your road to what you want to do.
So the next part was to empower ourselves and our technologists. And again, a lot of this came out of having a new leadership come into our department. So from the management side of things, the idea was that we wanted to identify areas where we could improve processes. In the past, before I was able to do something with my staff or Anthony with his staff, we would have to go check with the upper management to make sure that what we were doing gelled well with whatever their grand plan was. And that may have been a decent way to do things when both of us were new back in 2008. But this now is 2012, 2013, and we're still doing things the same old way. You know, at some point, you have to be able to trust your managers to be able to manage. That was one of the things that the new director decided to do. And people are going to make mistakes, and Anthony and I certainly did, especially after we were empowered. But the idea was that we could recognize when we made those mistakes, recognize them as teachable moments, and try to figure out what we could do better in the past. So it was no longer you failed or you're bad. It was, all right, well, what can we do so this doesn't happen again? And when that attitude changes, it really helps with the overall morale. And then it goes hand in hand with providing constructive feedback. And this really helped Anthony and I when we were seeing this example from our boss. It really helped us then work with our teams and, again, push those teachable moments and provide with them with the constructive feedback. And again, getting back to that first E, if you don't encourage people to try to do things, this isn't going to happen. You know, if I fall down, I have to be encouraged to get back up and try again, so that I'm not going to fall down again the next time, or I'm, you know, not going to jump the next time. So again, this came top down from the new director. Once Anthony and I were comfortable doing these new processes, we passed this along to our staff. So a few years ago, my staff might have come to me and asking if they should install one particular version of Office versus another on a machine that an instructor was going to use in a lab classroom. And I'd have to sit there and ask questions to them, and they're giving me the answers that eventually leads them down the path of, okay, I should install this version of Office rather than the other one. Now, after I was empowered, I started pushing that to my staff, and they became empowered to do the same. And the idea was that we always told them, look at it in the context of the impact on instruction. Make the call. If you delay for 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes of instruction class time that can never be brought back. They can't keep the class late because there's another class starting right afterwards. So we wanted to make sure that our technologists were not going to delay anything in terms of supporting the instructional environment. And to do that, they cannot be afraid to fail. And we had to continue to, again, that gets back to encouragement. We had to encourage them to try again, even if they did fail, getting back to teachable moments. And all of this went to help us find ways to improve our workflow and remove some redundancies that we had in place, like I was talking about before with having upper management check our every last little move. Pull that out of the workflow, and now all of a sudden we're actually able to make that impact on instruction. So that last E then would be education. So we need to leverage our professional development opportunities. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of regional, national conferences or certificates or seminars or webinars, all sorts of things. In fact, you guys are on one of them today. And some of us attended SIGUCCS last year, Anthony and I included. the idea is that you want to develop the talent that you have. You want to encourage your staff to pursue degrees. NJIT is lucky in that they will cover our tuition if we come here. And they'll also pay per credit rate for us to go to another institution. So we are actively encouraging our staff members, young and old, to pursue their degrees, continue getting their degrees, or go for a further degree. And that's been pretty successful.
We're both products of it.
Yeah.
So Phil and I are products of, them pushing us to finish our degrees.
And that helps the staff really see that there is a benefit to what they do, because now they're involved in the role as students. So now when that student calls and says they need to have their password reset, that staff member can look at it from the perspective of, oh, how would I feel if I'm in their shoes? Because they are in their shoes. They are a student here. And all of a sudden, if they can't access their coursework, so they understand, they can see it from the student's perspective. So we also are promoting interaction with other institutions. When the director came in, he was asked by our regional group, NJIT, to co-chair our user services group. That was something that we had never had locally here in Jersey before, or at least not through NJIT. And since then, we've had 2, if not 3, user services days at various colleges throughout the state, where the user services staff can get together and have a little one-day conference with maybe 10 or so sessions talking about various things that you might see at a service desk, a call center, or a desktop support group. And it's really helped us build some level of interaction with other institutions. Again, all this goes together, and it is just continual. I'm not sure how well this is translating through the webinar, but that circle is actually spinning.
So the next thing that we did is we reorganized how IST was set out. But we all know that reorganization can be a bad word, depending on how it's said and what's meant by it at that time. So you need to, if you decide to reorganize and you're not removing positions, you want to make sure that you sell it to the staff, the right way, to make them feel comfortable, which it all leads back to, encouraging and empowering them. This way they don't, they know that if they have something to say about it, they can feel free to. So what did we do? Our original department was very disjointed. We had IST, which was TSC, or Technology Support Center, and the library controlled ITMS, which is Instructional Technology and Media Services. So IST, the TSC, had user services, which was the service desk or the help desk, and non-instructional support, where ITMS handled instructional technology and instructional design. So there was no central IT policy team. There was no central IT project team. There's hostile competition between the two of us, between IST's TSC and the library's ITMS. We would jump on each other. I mean, we had things split. We had classroom support split between CMF and them. CMF would handle computers. ITMS would handle everything else in the classroom. And the service desk used ticketing system. ITMS ignored the ticketing system. So it wasn't good, both, and it's often led, and I'm sure it happens at, other institutions too, is bad-mouthing other teams. Oh, yeah, your computer doesn't work because the person who worked on it, they're no good, they shouldn't be there, or they just don't know what they're doing, and that's not good, because you're telling that to an instructor, and now the instructor is going to be like, well, what's going on here? IT's IT. To them, everybody's the service desk, or everybody's the help desk, so it's all the help desk.
Right, this is bad enough from our perspective, being in one of these groups. From a user perspective, if they have a problem with something in the classroom, or they have a question about how to do something with their computer, who do they call? So it's a question with their computer, but is it using their computer to build their course, and then do they call the computer support people, or do they call the instructional technology or instructional design people. It was very confusing, and that did often lead to them going to one team for one particular issue and then getting help with all these other issues that that team really wasn't best equipped to handle in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So what do we do? So we streamlined everything a little bit more. TSC handles all user services.
Well, before we did that, we actually moved ITMS out of the library into IST.
Yeah, that's right.
And actually, as of last year when we gave this presentation, this was the last slide as far as reorganization goes. This year we actually have one more after this too.
Sorry.
That's okay. So it was a multi-year process, and it's probably not finished yet either if either one of us have learned anything here. But the first thing that we did, as Anthony was saying, is that we clearly defined where classroom support belonged and where user support belonged. And getting to my point a little bit earlier, that still doesn't really define it from the user's perspective because, okay, I have a problem in the classroom, but it's with my computer in the classroom. Who am I calling? That's what we solved this year, but I'll let Anthony continue here.
So since with all user services being moved here and all classroom support being moved to ITMS, we also moved instructional technology over to the TSC side and instructional design over to the ITMS side. Now design just deals with designing the classroom, how the classroom's going to be laid out, you know, in Moodle and elsewhere. So the professor knows now, well, if I got a call, if I have a problem with Moodle, I call, you know, I know that I'm going to get the Moodle people. But who do they call? It's still, like Phil said, it still doesn't really answer who does everybody call. So one of the other things that have been being heavily promoted is that the service desk is a single point of contact. Now, some people may see that as a single point of failure because if, you know, the service desk isn't properly trained or doesn't log the call or a slew of other issues that can come up with it, you know, the person could be forgotten about. And does it happen? Well, absolutely. We're humans. We're not robots. It's going to happen. But when it does happen, then we take care of it and we deal with it the quickest that we can. It's happened, you know, before, and if it's a problem with CMF, I'll talk to, you know, Phil, or if it's a problem with, you know, Moodle, I'll talk to Mike Koskinen, who's the assistant director, and he's in charge of the Moodle group, or the instructional technology, or instructional designers, excuse me. And we'll get that resolved same day so that that person doesn't have to wait anymore. But being a single point of contact makes everything a lot easier because regardless of the issue the person is having, they dial 2900, they're going to get somebody on the phone, and they're going to get put to the right person. They will get a ticket put into the system, the ticket goes to the appropriate group, and if it's an emergency, especially with the classroom, if the projector is down in the classroom, if speakers are down in a lecture hall, we put the call in and we call the appropriate group, which is Phil's group or ITMS. And they will go out and they will fix it so that it is as minimal of impact as possible on that teaching time. And the other good thing that we did was we actually got ITMS to use the same ticketing system, and I think that's mostly, you know, thanks to my partner Phil over here, who uses it and kind of has been pushing them and coaching them to actually use the system.
Trying to. So this is the new slide this year. We since recognize that some of that is still a little confusing, especially to our users. And that there were still redundancies, especially in terms of staff, their knowledge, where we had people in two areas that had the same expertise, and they were working on different teams, and they did things different ways. If we could bring them together onto one single team, we're just increasing our ability to help the university community. So within the Office of Digital Learning and Technology Support, there is the IST Service Desk, for which Anthony is the manager. There is the Digital Learning Group, which we've combined instructional technology and design. So now it's no longer, well, is this a Moodle issue or is this a classroom design issue? It doesn't matter. If it's anything to do with digital learning, you go talk to the Digital Learning Group. And then the last thing we did was that we rebranded the, well, that's still pending whether or not we're going to use the name, but the former Instructional Technology and Media Services Group is now called the Media and Technology Support Services Group. Within there you have all your classroom support, you've got all your desktop and mobile device support, and one thing that we hadn't mentioned yet was that that also includes all the special event support, which has some AV and digital media things. Now, that expertise there in our digital media group, as well as our classroom support teams, goes back to supporting that idea of convergence that I mentioned earlier, where we need to be able to leverage WebEx technologies and all the hardware that will go along with that, as well as needing to have a co-pilot in the room that's properly trained, so that a faculty member who maybe doesn't really have any experience with WebEx or those types of technologies, maybe doesn't even really use computers that much, they can deliver their instruction through this new converged method where people are in class, people are at home, people are driving, people are on vacation, people are looking at it 7 hours later on a completely different time zone watching a recording of it. So bringing all these teams together, leveraging all the knowledge that these disparate groups had as a single entity, all reporting up through our academic provost, it's really allowed us to have a positive and successful impact on that idea of convergence for our strategic plan. It looks like I stole my own thunder. So this brought us to a common vision and goals here. So like I said, we report up through the provost, through the CIO. During this reorganization, we transferred some personnel around. We didn't get rid of or eliminate any staff lines. We just moved some teams around and better organized the way things were laid out. This brought together groups that in the past Anthony had said, and I had said as well, we had some unhealthy competition where I would do things one way and another group would do things a different way, and we would both badmouth the other group. Well, now we're the same group, and in fact, we all work together. We have to work together. So now I've bit my tongue and realized that, you know, they did things better in some cases, and I'm sure well, I hope they've done the same for me as well. And now we're working together, and it's provided a better work environment for ourselves. It's provided a better environment for our users, as they're not always hearing all the bad things about the other team. And it's also allowed these teams that previously never worked together, like for instance the digital learning, or what is now the digital learning team and our service desk, they never used to be very close in different departments and within different divisions. Now all of a sudden the manager and the assistant director of those two groups, they have an office right next to each other. So they're a lot closer than they ever were before. And the last thing today is defining what we do. IT service management.
Mm-hmm. So we needed to tell upper management, meaning the provost, president, in some cases our CIO and director, you know, what we do, and you know, also our customers. So as you can see in the slide, and I'm sure we can, for the most part, all agree with this. You know, our friends, you know, think we're like some sort of, you know, I don't know, electrical technician. Our parents think we're geniuses. Society thinks we just sit on the phone all day. Our bosses all think we sleep all day. And then we feel like, you know, we're running the Starship Enterprise when all that we actually do is go to Google and ask it a question. Amazing how much Google knows. So do our customers know what we do? Well, they might know that we fix broken computers or reset passwords, but there's not much understanding in the value of these services. You know, this all links back to, you know, the 3 E's. Technologists that we have are hopefully beginning to gain that understanding of what we bring to the institution. You know, by looking at password resets as more than a password reset, or helping someone design their Moodle courses more than just slapping a bunch of stuff on a web page and calling it a day. You know, hopefully they're starting to see that that's all facilitating online learning or in-person or traditional learning. You know, and that's what we want to do. But again, that's all on the 3 E's. If we don't encourage them, if we don't empower them, if we don't educate them, they're not going to see it as that. And a password reset will always be just that. It'll just be password reset. So how do we, does any of it demonstrate business value? I think, we've been kind of explaining that, yes, it does, but just because, our customers don't understand it, or we don't understand it, doesn't mean that it can't be articulated. They need a sort of a guide as to what, we provide. So how do we demonstrate business value? We select staff completed our an IT service management course. That was the CIO who gave that course?
Yep.
Our CIO did that, and it helped them to understand ITSM best practices, which aren't necessarily idle. They're not necessarily hand in hand, but pretty close. And it helped develop a common vocabulary between our divisions. Phil, myself, our director, and our CIO, and other multitude of people within our division can speak more so in business terms now than before. And that's what we want. We want that common vocabulary that both IT can understand and our president and provost understand. And as of March 2016, 3 staff received ITIL Foundation certification, which is myself, Phil, and our director.
So around the same time, actually a little bit before we got our certifications, we were also asked by our CIO to develop and publish a service catalog. Actually, we were asked before we even went to SIGUCCS, as I recall. This was back maybe February of 2015, and it was something we toyed around with. We had a couple meetings for. We came up with a service catalog, and then we presented it, and I believe basically the day afterwards, ECAR released their Higher Education IT Service Catalog, which we have linked here. And this will be, if you haven't seen it already, I'd be surprised, but if you haven't, that link will be available to people after the webinar is over. And we use that to look at what we had already done as far as our business service catalog goes, so where we had things right in a couple spots where we had missed some things, just to bring it to completion. We also looked at establishing a comprehensive list of the IT projects. It's not project management, not yet anyway. At this point, it was just getting a handle on that question of what is it that we do. Along with this, we promoted the service desk as that single point of contact, as Anthony was talking about before. It's really the big key takeaway from it is that it promotes a very consistent customer experience in that there's one single phone number for them to call, whether their issue is with their computer or a classroom technology or a course design or a password reset or questions about what research opportunities are available in our high-performance computing clusters. All of those things can be routed straight through the service desk, and while they might not have the answer or the solution right there on the phone, although they do for probably close to 60% of the tickets that come in, they will be able to get that assigned directly to the team that can best address whatever the question is or fix whatever the issue is. One of the things we realized when we were doing this is that the service management system, well, you can't even really call it a service management system. We had an incident management system. It wasn't up to the task. It only did incident management. It required a Perl doctorate to be able to understand anything, or if you wanted to do any sort of updates to the interface or to the user list or anything like that. It was very rigid in that we couldn't customize it or do anything else that we wanted to, and like I said, it had no project tracking to it. So the new system, which we went with Surewell Service Management, supports 11 processes out of the box. It has 0 coding. There's some logic tree stuff that you might have to sit down and think about for a minute or two, but there's no coding. There's no dropping into a command line interface or writing lines of Perl script or Python or any of that kind of stuff. It's very flexible, which now a year into it, we can tell you There are times where things are a little too flexible and you might customize a little bit too much and then find that you're kind of left on your own on an island there. Thankfully, we didn't do that too badly, so we're okay. It has a built-in project tracking tool, and like I said, we were not looking for project management, we were just looking for project tracking. So basically, what are we doing and how far along are we? And we don't need any advanced project management at this point. We just wanted to see what we're doing. It also has a robust customer portal and supports mobile devices. Our previous one was very rigid in that it was a web interface, but it was not responsive design, which meant if you had a small monitor for your computer or a laptop, or God forbid you wanted to use it on your phone, it just wasn't going to happen. Cherwell actually has a mobile app for iOS and Android.
So we needed to define the link. So defining the link, what did we start with? The 2020 vision priority was students. So how did we do it? We need to create a courteous and welcoming campus environment, develop service-focused message for all faculty and staff. Because in the end, what they wanted to do as part of that 2020 vision was to increase our student retention rate by 6% and the QOL for students, or quality of life, by 10%. So what we needed to do for the students was we needed to improve administrative processes by examining our policies and practices, and we're doing that slowly but surely. We're starting to see where our policies are lax, and we're starting to streamline them a little bit more and make them a little less rigid than they were in the past, while still keeping with their core attributes. And then the scholarly research, we needed to refine and streamline the infrastructure for research support.
So when we talk about some of those reorgs that we did, the way that we would present it to our upper management is that this will go towards supporting things like one of the KPIs was to increase our funding by 80%. So by putting these people in these new positions, or reorganizing our support structure for this thing or one other thing, that will help support that KPI. And the reorg also helped go support the other vision priority of learning. This gets back to that convergence, that topic that I've mentioned a few times today. We needed to be able to bring together the appropriate teams with the appropriate knowledge and history here to be able to develop and deliver those courses in a converged method. We need to be able to build new classrooms around this or redesign existing ones, and a lot of times that redesign includes basically putting a webcam in the front of the room, a webcam in the back of the room, and putting a monitor someplace else in the room so that the instructor, like I said, the confidence monitor, so that the instructor can see themselves. We're not talking about a couple tens of thousands of dollars redesign on a room. We're talking about dropping a laptop and a few webcams into a classroom so that we can support this. And having that ITSM suite, as well as having a common understanding through ITIL, that supports pretty much every objective out there. It allows our IT support staff to have a clear understanding of our impact on instruction. And we can have a conversation with administration, and they understand what we're talking about, because we're not just giving them the ones and zeros, we're giving them in business terms the value that we provide. Our new ITSM system is also promoting transparency. In the previous system, I could only see the tickets that were assigned to me, and our telecommunications department could only see the tickets assigned to them. The new system, everyone can see everyone else's tickets. There's no reason not to. It also allows the users to get a better understanding of what the current progress is on fulfilling the request or for resolving their incident.
So it doesn't just stop here. All right, everything, there's always going to be a continual service improvement. You're always going to improve upon what you have. Yes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but sometimes you can improve it. Now, there's nothing against improving it. So what have we done? We have, for instance, Sherwell allows us a more robust online reporting tool for our customers. Right now, it's still in beta. We released it over the summer to our general population, and so far it's gotten a pretty good. It's been received well by our community. So with that, with that new portal, which completely just, it's a lot better than what we had with Helpline. With Helpline, we had something that was pretty much what the techs use, so it was very clunky and difficult for them to use. We have a few things that we're working on for the future right now. We're working on our knowledge management, problems. So problem is basically if multiple people are reporting a network outage in a building, it goes from just being an incident, which may affect one or two people, to a problem that's affecting an entire building. We're also looking at CMDB and change management. It's not necessarily the order that we're going to go in, but it's what we're looking towards in the future. Right now, we're working on the portal. We're still collecting feedback from our customers, and we're going to review it within the next few months. We have our IT project tracking, which is in an alpha stage right now, and it's going through kind of a vetting process. And change management, I've written some documents for it that are being reviewed by our CIO at the moment. But continual service improvement is just that. It never stops. You need to consistently make sure that everything you have is up to date. The technology you're using is as current as budgetarily possible, and that your service catalog is actually consistent with what you actually provide your community. If you're no longer providing dial-up service, which, believe it or not, we were still providing up until about 2 years ago, that should no longer be a part of your service catalog. That should be, retired. And you can keep it somewhere in your service catalog, but it needs to be in a retired state so that nobody's confused by it and thinks that it is still something that is available to the general public. So with that, if anybody has questions?
Anthony, this is Beth. I was wondering, how did your staff receive all these changes? Did people understand what was going on? Were they generally supportive? Did you have staff leave?
The important part to take away is that these changes didn't happen overnight. It was at this point it's like a 3-year process for all these changes. So the staff was involved. A lot of these decisions were made above our head too, but the staff was involved as much as they could be, as early as they could be in the process. We didn't have anyone leave over any reorganizations, but we did have some people get moved into new departments. I'm one of them myself, actually. I got moved from handling mostly desktop support to all of a sudden I now have desktop support, event support, classroom support, and I'm sure there's a couple things I'm forgetting on that. So it's been trying, but I think in order to make it successful, having us involved earlier in the conversation certainly helped.
Yep. So it was received well. At first they were a little confused and a little bit jarred because everything's kind of been same old song and dance every day. But once we told them what we were looking to do and that we were looking to let them make those decisions and be responsible for their actions, it was received well.
That's great, thank you. How many people work in IST?
Somewhere around 70. Within the newly minted digital learning and technology support office. I think we have about 25 through the 3 main areas, plus an army of students.
Well, any college would survive without an army of students.
In hindsight, is there anything you would have done differently?
I think Anthony and I both feel that we rolled out Sherwell a little too early.
Yeah.
We did not have enough time to really completely test it all the way. And in some cases, we've paid for that through having to put fixes in place kind of on a haphazard emergency schedule rather than on a clearer rollout schedule. And we also had some departments come back to us and say that they didn't like the new, actually they still say that they don't like the new system, they prefer the older system, because from the technician standpoint, they believe it was easier to use. And they're probably right, we just didn't have enough time to get them involved a year ago when we were rolling it out. So definitely more time in the testing phase of Sherwell's rollout.
Yeah.
We have another question. How many on the front line, how many people do you have on the front line, particularly help desk and the single point of contact idea?
In the help desk, I have 3 full-timers and 2 to 3 students at any given point in time, and I am here as a backup. I will go on the phone if necessary. So we have 4 full-time, including myself, and 3 students at any given point in time throughout the day. We're open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. and I employ 9 students to cover that time along with my full-timers. And it's been working pretty well so far. Hold times are anywhere from 30 seconds to 2-3 minutes during peak times. First 2 weeks of the semester, which is busy for everybody, very volatile. But I think the max this year was about 10 or 15 minutes, which is not very good, but when we're getting bombarded with phone calls, you know, it's as best as we can do. But so far, we haven't received any complaints with our staffing.
And what's your average ticket volume?
The beginning of the semester, I want to say we did about 120 to 150 tickets a day, and during this time where everything's kind of like, you know, everybody's already kind of moving along, we're doing about 60 to 70 tickets a day. So we're doing on average anywhere between 11 and 13,000 tickets a year.
Great. This may be the last question, but are you imagining any more future changes?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably not for the next few years. Our current president has his contract through 2019, and most of these changes at this point was to support that 2020 vision goal. So a lot of these things are now, we've got the structure in place, let's meet or to try to work towards the goals, and those goals all had deadlines of 2020. Now there are milestones that we're supposed to be hitting each year, and there are committees meeting on campus on, at this point, I believe it's a quarterly basis to review what our progress is. So I'm sure if we're severely lacking in one spot or another, there may be some other changes to come through. But as of right now, I don't anticipate anything, you know, coming right around the corner. At least not in the IT area.
Right. Well, thank you both so much. We don't have any other questions that have come in, but you know, I know I personally found this very informative and enlightening, and good luck to you on this journey of process improvement.
Thank you. And just real quick, here are some tools and references that we use to create our service catalog and other items that we went through throughout the presentation. And I think do you want me to send you this presentation so that you can post it with the...
Yeah, go right ahead. I'll be happy to do that. And if all goes well, this was recorded, so it will also be available on the SIGUCCS website. But yes, please go ahead and send it to me.
And there's our contacts if anybody wants to reach out to us with any further questions or comments.
Well, thank you both so much. We really appreciate your time and your dedication.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.